Ave Maria in the Afternoon is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Welcome to Ave Maria in the Afternoon, examining the world through the lens of faith from the heart of the Church to help us navigate the culture. Here's Dr. Marcus Peter.
Good afternoon to you all, and Merry Christmas as we continue this Ave Maria in the Afternoon year in review. This being the last hour of this program for this year, we're going to do things a little bit differently. First off, we'll have a conversation with Marcus and our good friend George Weigel. One of the big news stories, of course, the biggest news story this year was the election. And one of the biggest parts of the election was when President Biden announced in July that he was dropping out of the race. And when that happened, there was a prominent Italian theologian, very sad to see Biden dropping out, saying that this was officially the end of, quote, Concilliar Catholicism, unquote, in the U.S. And there is a view from many people in Rome and many people in different parts of the world, some of these so-called elite theologians, about how the church in the U.S. is now going to fall into some kind of fundamentalist, racist, xenophobic, homophobic, etc. state. Well, if you talk to the people who are actually the leaders in the church in America, including a lot of people at EWTN, your Catholic Answers type people, your Bishop Barron type people, well, they beg to differ. And George Weigel, author of Evangelical Catholicism and many other books, spends his whole life studying the state of the church in the U.S. And so he joined us to talk about this back in July, and we're going to share that with you again. I remember when I called George, he was like, well, he was a little hesitant to talk about it. He's like, this is such a stupid comment that part of me doesn't even want to spend time acknowledging it and give it attention. At the same time, such a stupid comment demands a response from us. And a quote that we actually have up on the wall in our studio here, George referring to this as wokery with a theological veneer. It's a very George Weigel type quote. If you listen to him a lot, you can hear his voice in that statement. So that's the beginning of this hour. And then in the end of this hour, we look back at what was really the biggest story for us here at Ave Maria Radio. That, of course, was the death of Al Kresta. And it happened so fast that in some ways it's still just starting to sink in over the last couple of weeks. Al was, if you were listening to the program a lot over in the earlier part of the spring, he was ill a lot, just wasn't feeling well. And it went from him being hospitalized in late April to being diagnosed with advanced liver cancer in early May to passing away about 5 weeks later. And even that last week, he was still very responsive to the doctors telling him, there's nothing we can do, to I was actually out of town at the time. I got a call. I was trying to get back. His grandkids were trying to get back. And so we'll hear a conversation that Marcus had with Sally Kresta, Al's beloved wife, behind the scenes for 30 years of Ave Maria Radio, sharing some of her experiences. And we'll also talk with his son, James. What was it like to grow up in Al Kresta's house and sit down for dinner every day with this guy who had just gotten off of a international radio program? We'll have more to say on that later on in the hour. Also, we just celebrated the Feast of the Holy Family. And I think many of the families listening now, if you're taking time out of your evening to listen to EWTN and Ave Maria Radio, you're the kind of people that the Holy Family want you to be. You're striving for holiness. You're striving to learn more about your faith. That certainly is the Kresta family as well, both Sally and Al and their kids, and then now their kids having their own families, raising grandkids, are continuing this pursuit of holiness. Pope Francis remarked the other day, just as a gentle reminder, when you're eating dinner, put down your phone, because there is no replacement for face-to-face conversation with your family. Many of us have that time this time of year to see people we don't usually get to see face-to-face. And Pope Francis saying that, holiness begins in the family. We talk about this all the time with Greg Popchak when he's a guest on Ave Maria in the Afternoon. Greg, of course, talks about building the domestic church on his own program. Same thing with Dr. Ray Garendi. You hear him every day from 1 to 2 talking about this, striving to grow in holiness as a family. And so we'll draw back onto that, talking about how Al and his family helped each other grow in holiness, even as he was hosting a radio program every day. Going to skip the news today. Let's talk with George Weigel about the so-called end of Post-Conciliar Catholicism. You're listening to the Ave Maria in the Afternoon 2024 Year in Review.
Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. An Italian theologian, Marcello Neri, argued just this past week that the withdrawal of Joe Biden from the 2024 presidential race marks the demise of Concilliar Catholicism in the U.S. And he also makes complaints that the United States Catholic bishops never fully backed Joe Biden. Now, the fact is, this is an absurd claim. Conciliar Catholicism, in its true sense, with the spirit of the council, is alive and well in the United States of America. And here to talk with us about this is George Weigel. And he also helps us understand why this claim is outlandish. George is the author of, most recently, To Sanctify the World, The Vital Legacy of Vatican II. He's also Distinguished Senior Fellow and William E. Simon Chair in Catholic Studies at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, and he's the author of many other books, some of which include Witness to Hope, The Next Pope, and Evangelical Catholicism. George, it's great to speak with you again.
Marcus, nice to be with you. Sorry we have to spend airtime talking about what really was one of the most idiotic things I've read in recent years.
I was going to say asinine, but I'll take. I was going to say asinine, just absurd at the very.
Well, we can go through the thesaurus here and probably not run out of deprecatory adjectives. No, this is completely ridiculous. First of all, as I pointed out in a column during the last presidential electoral cycle, mm-hmm. Joe Biden was a very pre-conciliar Catholic. Mm-hmm. He treated religious leaders as power brokers, not as religious leaders. He used nuns as props. He, I think, has a certain level of personal piety. Mm-hmm. But his whole, six-pack Joe from Scranton affect is much more redolent of 1920s Boston mm-hmm. than it is of 21st century conciliar Catholicism in the United States. Secondly, his fulsome embrace, that would be the charitable description, of the abortion license, mm-hmm. And his misrepresentation of that as a matter of human rights is in direct contradiction to the teaching of the Second Vatican Council in Gaudium et Spes, the Pastoral Constitution on the Church in the Modern World, which lists abortion as one of the grave evils that can never be justified under any circumstances because they are a fundamental assault on the dignity of the human person.
Right.
So this is all nonsense, and yet it reflects a certain view in Italy about what the Church in the United States is like. It's a deeply ill-informed view. There's an element of jealousy in it, I believe, because the Church in many parts of the United States is far more vibrant than in many parts of Italy.
Right.
And I frankly don't know why my old friend John Allen at Crux and his staff drew anybody's attention to this piece.
So
I mean, it's so stupid. I mean, why are we wasting ink on this or whatever these things are that cross our screens? It's not ink; it's electrons or something. So anyway, that's as George Patton said at the end of the great speech at the beginning of the movie, now you know how I feel.
So George, I do want to ask, as you mentioned, there might be a hint of jealousy, but there are a lot of reasons why the clergy in Europe, and unfortunately, Al and I had many conversations about this, that we sometimes see even the Holy Father make statements that seem to misunderstand or at least mischaracterize the faith fidelity and even the sheer vibrance and life of the church here in the United States of America. Now, what is problematic about this guy, Marcello Neri, is that he is he is part of the faculty of the reconstituted John Paul II Institute for Marriage and the Family. And he is claiming that Joe Biden, who has been very public about all of it, as you mentioned, all of his stances that stand against the particular tenets of the gospel of life, particularly to abortion, and yet he claims that Joe Biden is a good representation of Conciliar Catholicism. And I just don't understand, and I don't think anyone who reads this understands what's going on.
Well, one could slice and dice this in many ways, Marcus. The deconstruction of the John Paul II Institute at the Lateran University, of which this man is a prime example, is scandalous. This institute does not represent what John Paul II intended it to be or do when he founded it. And one of the things that the next pontificate is going to have to do is invite people like Professor Neri to find other employment and to reconstitute the John Paul II Institute at the Lateran University as a genuinely Catholic center of intellectual vitality, rather than what it has become, which is wokery with a theological veneer laid over it.
That's very well put.
That's how I feel about that. Now, the deeper game here, and it's not a game because it's deadly serious,
right,
is the theological guild in the Western world never forgave John Paul II for the 1993 encyclical Veritatis Splendor, the splendor of truth, and the renewal of Catholic moral theology.
Right.
Which, among other things, taught that there are, as the Second Vatican Council taught, intrinsically evil acts, things that are just wrong, period.
Right.
Ordinary human beings understand this. Intellectuals seem to have a hard time grasping it. And people like Professor Neri, I think, are part of a project to deconstruct the teaching of Veritatis Splendor. This, too, is going to have to be addressed in the next pontificate. But to make matters even worse, the assault on this notion of intrinsically evil acts and the attempt to raise up a moral theological method known as proportionalism.
That's right. Which Veritatis Splendor was very clearly against and cautioned about.
Correct. That argument first began over the encyclical Humanae Vitae. And it was an important argument to be had then, and Paul VI made it clear that proportionalism was not going to be erected as the official moral theological method of the Catholic Church.
That's right.
John Paul II nailed that down further, or deeper, with Veritatis Splendor. But the driver of this right now is not contraception, it's the LGBTQ plus agenda. And that is a far more serious matter, because that is a matter of the denial of biblical anthropology. Proportionalism in the service to the notion that certain sexual acts can be countenanced even though they contradict the biblical anthropology of Genesis 1 to 3. That is a fundamental assault on divine revelation.
Right.
And it has to be described as that, and it has to be resisted on those grounds. And that will be a major point of discussion at the next papal conclave. And I don't think the forces represented by Professor Neri and others are going to win that argument.
Nor could they ever. Any wave of some of these ideologies that attempt to claim nuance over the objectivity of the proportionate hierarchy of moral goods that's objective, but always fails throughout ecclesial history.
Yeah, I think a lot of the people who listen to programs like yours are probably wondering what is the matter with these people.
So, George, we need to pause right there, but we'll pick up this thought on the other side of the break. My guest is George Weigel, author and most recently to Sanctify the World, and we are talking about the claim that Conciliar Catholicism is dying with Joe Biden stepping down from the electoral ticket. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
When your children consider going to college, where are you going to find a place that will prepare them for the future and build on the foundation that you've laid? The answer? Ave Maria University. With an authentically Catholic curriculum including 35 majors, AMU prepares students to take on the world.
My daughter told me she was published in a scientific journal as an undergrad. I'm so proud of her. The world needs Catholic physicists, and my daughter's going to be one of them.
Learn more at avemaria.edu. That's avemaria.edu.
Why does the Catholic Church obligate its members to attend Mass on Sundays? For Christians, Sunday, the first day of the week or the eighth day, replaces the seventh day, the Sabbath, as the day to reserve for worshiping God. The Sabbath represents the completion of the first creation. When Jesus Christ arose from the dead on Sunday, he inaugurated the new creation. Thus, Sunday became the Lord's Day and is now the foremost holy day of obligation in the universal Church, as we are told in the Catholic Catechism. We are bound to attend Mass under pain of grave sin unless there is a serious reason for not doing so. Sundays are also called to be a day of rest. Christians are bound to abstain from work which impedes worshiping God and the joy of the Lord's Day. This is Peggy Stanton, and this has been the Order of Malta's Minute with the Catechism.
Maybe you've been hearing a lot about the need to make a spiritual communion while participating from home in a live-streamed or broadcast Mass. Maybe you've even prayed the prayer of spiritual communion. Spiritual communion is a concept that goes all the way back to the 4th century. It flourished in the Eastern Church and gradually moved west. Spiritual communion stresses the transcendence of God, where we unite our desires, intentions, and loves with the holy sacrifice of the Mass and the consecration of the Eucharist at the altar. Jesus, I embrace you and unite myself wholly to you.
You're listening to the Ave Maria in the Afternoon 2024 Year in Review.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter, and we're talking with George Weigel about some recent claims that were put forth by an Italian theologian about the death of Concilliar Catholicism in the United States that's marking the rise of, quote-unquote, a populist and substantially racist version of the faith. So, George, you were saying earlier at the close of the last segment that all of our listeners, as they find out about these pieces of news, wonder what on earth is going on in the mind of these academics.
Yeah, I find that when I try to explain this whole proportionalist program and its attempt to deny either that there are such things as intrinsically evil acts, or the more subtle move is to say, well, there may be, but we can't know that this particular instance of that act was intrinsically evil. Mm-hmm. People just shake their heads. I mean, anyone try to make the argument that torturing a child is not intrinsically evil. I remember being on a National Public Radio program right after Veritatis Splendor came out, debating this point with another person who claimed theological credentials but didn't really have them, who was actually saying that Einstein's theory of relativity meant that we could no longer speak of intrinsically evil acts. I mean, this is so loopy that you can't even begin to pull it apart. But I said to her, let me be very blunt here. What combination of intentions and consequences, which is what proportionalism asks us to do, make a calculus of intentions and consequences with the act. I said, what combination of intentions and consequences would justify someone raping you in the parking lot outside this NPR building as we leave today? And of course, there's no answer to that.
Yep, exactly.
There's no answer to that.
Which defeats the proportionalist case, because the problem with proportionalism is an argument that all acts are intrinsically morally neutral, and you only weigh the good and the bad based on positive or negative outcomes, and all acts have positive or negative outcomes. And the problem with that statement is you can't even talk about the good anymore because you have no standard of measuring the good.
Well, when you have no way of condemning the utterly wicked. I've just returned from the 32nd annual assembly of a seminar I lead in Poland. And every year our students visit the extermination camp at Auschwitz-Birkenau.
Mm.
If you can't say that, if you refuse to concede that there are intrinsically evil acts,
Mm-hmm.
then you have no ground on which to justify what happened at Birkenau.
Right.
And if you really want to live in a world where that's the moral culture that dominates, you are talking about a totally dehumanized environment. I mean, that really is, the Hobbesian war of all against all.
Mm-hmm. And that's part of the problem, George, of proportionalism by itself, that it stands because of its reluctance to admit in the notion of things that are intrinsically evil. It stands but a hop, skip, and a jump away from absolute moral relativism, which I know it's an oxymoron. And that's why first Paul VI and John Paul II were so keen to speak against it, because they knew what would happen. And so when Benedict became Pope, he addressed it right off the bat. We are in moral relativism right now because of this.
Yeah, I think this is the untold story of what led up to Humanae Vitae in 1968.
Mm.
And that is that Paul VI finally figured out what the game was here. The game being played by the so-called majority report,
Right,
which recommended some modification of the Church's teaching on contraception.
Mm-hmm.
The real game was to install proportionalism as the magisterially approved method of doing moral theology in the Catholic Church. And once he figured that out, then the conclusion followed rather readily. And that's been the battle ever since 1968. I mean, these people do not quit. But as I indicated in our first segment, this has become much more serious because the use of proportionalism to advance the gender ideology and the LGBTQ plus agenda is an even more fundamental denial of the truths of divine revelation than was the case in the argument before Humanae Vitae. And a line really has to be drawn here. And if you want to see pastorally where conceding to the proportionalist gets you, simply look at liberal Protestantism around the world.
That's right.
I mean, this is not simply a matter of, Marcus Peters' abstract view or George Weigel's abstract view. It is empirically demonstrable that this concession to what we now call wokery is death-dealing to religious communities. And that's not a matter of my metaphysical speculation. That is a matter of empirical fact.
Right. And one need look no further than, I want to say just a little over, I think, 100 years ago, the Lambeth Conference that opened the door for contraception, and how that's caused an almost complete denigration of the definition of marriage and the family in the vast majority of Protestant churches across the world, and how that's impacted even sexual morality as a result. As I mentioned, it's not a slippery slope. It just completely lends itself to that, because the proportionalist view is there is no intrinsically evil moral act.
Yeah, the Lambeth Conference of 1930, to which you refer, really was a watershed. And Lambeth tried, the bishops of the Anglican Communion meeting there at Lambeth Palace tried to hedge this with all kinds of cautions, and contraception might be morally acceptable under certain circumstances. But I mean, once that door was open, the flood. The dam was breached, and the flood ensued, and now you see there is no such thing as an Anglican communion, because the churches in Africa are not in communion with Canterbury, or other Anglican churches around the world. So it's a very big mess. Now, fortunately for us, I think the bishops of the United States in the main understand that this is what the issue is. Bishops in Africa absolutely understand that this is what the issue is. This is the issue involved in these debates over the nature of marriage, over LGBTQ stuff, and they are not going to back off because our bishops here, African bishops I've been privileged to work with at the last several synods, all understand that we are at the bottom of the bottom line here. And the question is divine revelation real? And does it have binding authority over time?
Yeah. George, I'm so sorry, but we have to end the segment right now. But I want to thank you for making the time to talk to us. It was great speaking with you.
Always good to see you, and I let me just say to all of your listeners that I hope we remember with great fondness and gratitude the great Al Kresta, who was a true gift of God to the Church.
Yep. Well, thank you so much, George. My guest has been George Weigel, author of most recently To Sanctify the World. Now, just to close up the thoughts of that conversation, the fact is, Marcello Neri is completely mistaken about his presuppositions about the American Church. Conciliar Catholicism, which flows from the intent and true spirit of the Second Vatican Council, is alive, well, and thriving, particularly in the empowerment of the lay apostolate here in the United States of America. So stay tuned to Ave Maria in the afternoon next week, and we will continue these conversations that help us navigate the culture. I'm Marcus Peter.
St. Therese once told her sister Celine that when we trust ourselves and not God, our soul becomes barren and incapable of virtue. Her remedy? External works of charity. We all try to do it on our own sometimes without asking for God's help. At St. Paul Evangelization, we suggest sharing the gospel with someone who needs it. Check out streetevangelization.com to find a team near you where you can share the love of Jesus. If there isn't one in your area yet, perhaps God is calling you to start a team in your city. To learn more, visit streetevangelization.com.
Ave Maria in the afternoon is underwritten by the following nonprofit organization: Real Estate for Life. Buying or selling your home or business property? Real Estate for Life can connect you with one of 1,400 pro-life real estate agents around the world. When Real Estate for Life receives a referral fee, they donate 70% to Ave Maria Radio and Human Life International. More information at realestateforlife.org or 877-LIFE-US1. That's realestateforlife.org.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
I said to the sisters one day, what do you think you're going to look like in heaven? Oh, some of them had absolutely magnificent ideas. I didn't think of one of them. And so I got desperate because then my turn came. I didn't know what to say. And so in desperation, I said, what do you think I'll wear in heaven? And they all said with one voice, armor.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Do you own popular index mutual funds or ETFs? If so, you're automatically own shares of companies that conflict with your moral beliefs. Ave Maria mutual funds are managed to conform to pro-life and pro-family values. Long-term investors can invest in the no-load Ave Maria mutual funds. The experienced professional portfolio managers make decisions based on investment fundamentals and pro-life values. You can learn more about Ave Maria mutual funds today at 866 Ave Maria or visit AveMariaFunds.com.
Christ is the answer with Father John Riccardo.
I tell oftentimes an experience that I had at Divine Child when I was a young priest, 1 year ordained. First time I ever really saw the power of the Blessed Sacrament. And we simply exposed the Blessed Sacrament at the end of Mass one night. I encouraged people. I said, you know what, we've been in the habit of praying over people after Mass. I said, we're not going to do that this week. I'm just going to invite people to come on up and pray if they want to pray. And I put the Blessed Sacrament on the altar. I kneel down. As I kneel down, the church is in the sanctuary. The whole church. And as I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at the people there, and I'm looking at Jesus under the appearance of bread there, I saw the Lord standing on the altar. And he's just standing there looking out at all the people. And then at a certain point, he turned towards me, and he just bowed. And he says, don't you see how easy this is? You don't have to do anything. You just have to put me out. You put me out, and I will work.
Dr. Ray Guarendi.
What is criticism exactly? If you pay close attention, do you notice what most criticism is? Oh, it's not because you're doing something wrong or hurtful, something that needs corrected. Most criticism is, you're not doing it the way I would do it. Or you're not doing it the way I want you to do it. That's what most criticism is. And you have to get good at sorting that out. Otherwise, you're going to get real upset when anyone says anything about what you are doing. Now, of course, you could turn this on yourself. Do you do that? Is most of your criticism a message to someone else that says, you're not doing it the way I would do it? Well, save your criticism for things that are really wrong.
Good afternoon and welcome back. As I mentioned in the open, we are wrapping up this final hour of 2024, looking back at what was the biggest story for us this year, the death of Al Kresta. In this segment, his beloved wife, Sally, gives us behind-the-scene look at Kresta in the afternoon. Take it away, Marcus.
So, Sally, great to have you in the program.
Thanks, Marcus.
Sally, you know what? I don't think our listeners know who you are because Al mentioned your name all the time, but I don't think they know how you met. So if you want to start there before we go on to talking about the program itself.
Well, I met Al at Michigan State University at a time in my life where I was wandering away from the church. And when I arrived at Michigan State, he presented the gospel to me in a very plausible way. And so the first thing about our relationship is that he led me to the Lord. Mm-hmm. And he was an apologist from the get-go. So I benefited from that effort. We went on to get married and went into different ministries together, bookstores and theaters and whatnot, but it was always a marriage of mission. Mm-hmm. That was the idea. So, yeah.
Wow. Let's talk about the founding of Ave Maria Radio. Al always saw this as something that the both of you were doing together, and it was laborious in those first few years. So share with us about that.
Well, it was he had a side of him that was a very good businessman, and I think that played into it. He didn't realize, or we didn't realize when we moved here, that it was, he actually had to build it from the ground up, literally. There was no tower, there was no station. But he learned along the way. He hired very competent people. And he also was part of establishing a newspaper, Credo. So being a journalist, I think, was in his blood. And it all went very well, but I think it leaned on some talents of his that most people don't know about.
Mm-hmm. Like his administrative talents, his capacity for planning for the future of an institution, what that looks like, hiring the right kind of people. He had that vision going for him.
I believe so, yeah.
So what was it like for the family? Because in one way or another, you and the children were involved in Ave Maria Radio, and even Kresta in the morning, right? It started that way.
Yes, it did.
And then it became Kresta in the afternoon, then EWTN picked it up.
Yes. I don't know. My children were used to him being on the radio. He was on WMUZ in Detroit, and we lived nearby. Sometimes they were actually called in to do some commercials, and they would pay my kids in popcorn. And so I'd gather up the kids in the neighborhood, run them up to the radio station. They would do a little commercial of some kind and get popcorn. So I don't know, for them, it was just a matter of life, you know. They probably can't remember a time that he wasn't on the air.
And Ave Maria Radio has grown now to become the largest producer of English programming, not just nationally. It's gone international, and it's some of the highest caliber content in the Catholic world. in the light of all of this, you and your children have been those again, silent partners. You've been people alongside Al, working through this, talking with him, journeying with him. How has Al's work here influenced your own family life?
Well, we've had very interesting conversations. We've had very interesting guests over for dinner. I mean, there was always a level of discourse that it stretched me, certainly, and my kids would sit in on it. At one point, we had a ministry of having people at the dinner table to discuss current events and biblical issues or whatnot. So, yeah, I think it was an enriched family life, you might say, home life, because we met a lot of interesting people.
That's wonderful. But that's a kind of life at least I would hope for myself as well, that kind of enriching, intellectually, spiritually stimulating environment to raise a family in. So, Kresta in the Afternoon as a program, you've been there through all of the evolutions of the program, and a lot of it has been in dialogue with you. So share what that's been like, just watching the journey of that 27-year evolution of this great program.
Well, I would say it was molded to his own personality, so he had the freedom to invite people, and that's a real privilege to be able to do that. Also, I believe he really connected with a part of the audience that was hungry for more, let's say, more intellectual, demanding content, thing that would topics that would engage people a little more. So he was able to do. That's the freedom he had here to do that.
Yeah, and one of the things I greatly enjoy about Kresta in the Afternoon and the way Al handled it was, he never underestimated his listeners' capacity to be able to engage these truths, these questions. It's very, very common in the entire Catholic sphere to see people believe that you have to make things pithy, you have to make things watered down, you have to, this quote-unquote, meet people where they're at. And it's not that Al didn't do that, but he trusted that everyone needed to know about this, and so he brought them to that level to have that conversation with him.
Well, beginning with me at home, making dinner, listening to his show every day. I'm a very average person, you might. So I, as a sounding board, was just a common person that would be enriched and informed by his show. But it also, I would be the sounding board to say, I didn't understand a word you just said. Or, bring it down a little bit. So I always was honest with him. And, sometimes I would text him during the show and say, that was great. Or I'd say good. I only use great if I thought it was great. Mm-hmm. Or I might say, you sound tired. Or, I was just a sounding board out there.
The program ran for 27 years, and you've had so many intriguing dinner table conversations with guests and people who visited you, but you've also, across the years, come across people who've either shared with you or with Al how his work at Ave Maria Radio changed their life, changed their family life, probably changed their marriage, their children. So share what that's been like.
Well, it's always a surprise because, the audience is invisible to us. You're looking at a microphone. So it was always encouraging to him to go out into public. And if anybody had anything to say, he really appreciated that.
Mm. And what did that do in terms of the Christian witness in your own home, whenever you heard that many people were benefiting from the work of Al and your whole family?
Well, it was a gift. I would say he was a gift that the Lord has used. And it's really the Holy Spirit that does the work. So he was just faithful to come to work every day, whether he felt well or not. He would come into work, he would get behind the microphone and say what he had to say, and then the rest of it was done by the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, truly. Well, today being the final episode of Kresta in the Afternoon, Sally, we brought you on here to make sure that everyone hears your voice and knows the person who's been in the background of this program. I'd like to have you say a word of encouragement, exhortation, and goodbye to all of our listeners.
I do have some words I wanted to say, and it's to you, Marcus. I'm grateful that you came along when you did. I've been listening, and I have found myself interested and engaged as ever to the things that matter most. So there's so much chatter out there, so much meaningless, cliche-ridden chatter. But this show will continue to be purposeful and informed discussion, and I'm just so grateful to God that you came along.
Thank you for your kind words, Sally.
Marcus Peter talking with Sally Kresta, beloved bride of Al. We'll be back with more.
When your children consider going to college, where are you going to find a place that will prepare them for the future and build on the foundation that you've laid? The answer? Ave Maria University. With an authentically Catholic curriculum, including 35 majors, AMU prepares students to take on the world.
I've seen the difference in my son since he's been at Ave Maria. He's happy, he's excited about what he's going to do with his degree, and he's living his faith.
Learn more at avemaria.edu. That's avemaria.edu.
Ave Maria in the Afternoon is underwritten by the following nonprofit organization: Real Estate for Life. Buying or selling your home or business property? Real Estate for Life can connect you with one of 1,400 pro-life real estate agents around the world. When Real Estate for Life receives a referral fee, they donate 70% to Ave Maria Radio and Human Life International. More information at realestateforlife.org or 877-LIFE-US1. That's realestateforlife.org.
Do you have a teenager at home who's full of potential? Too often the world is telling you to be content with mediocrity instead of raising respectful and responsible young adults with strong character. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Ray. If you need some help, not only to navigate those teen years, but to really enjoy them, check out my book, Standing Strong, Good Discipline Makes Great Teens, as well as my other books on the store page at avemariaradio.net.
Support for this Ave Maria radio program comes in part by the non-for-profit St. Anthony Services. Are you shopping for mortgage products, Catholic investing, Catholic health, real estate, or estate planning? StAnthonyServices.org can help you find a Catholic professional for these needs. They regularly connect faithful citizens with faith-based professionals that share our Christian values. More information at StAnthonyServices.org or 877-LIFE-US1.
60 on 10 with Monsignor Charles Pope.
The third commandment, remember to keep holy the Sabbath day. You know, of all the commandments, it might seem that we would get this one right. After all, it commands us to rest one day. But so often we're off to our own pursuits. God asks us to take one day to stop, reflect, rejoice, spend time with Him and with our family. But so often we're running everywhere else. It's also a day for worship. The book of Leviticus says, 6 days work shall be done, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath of solemn rest and a holy convocation. You shall do no work. It is the Sabbath of the Lord. And the book of Hebrews says that we should not neglect to meet together, as is a habit of some. And so again, we're asked by God to spend time reflecting and worshiping, and likewise spend time with our family. The third commandment, remember to keep holy the Sabbath day.
For more about the 10 Commandments, visit EWTNRC.com.
It's time for Family Man with Dr. Gregory Popchak.
How do we raise faithful kids? Well, the answer is surprising. Make the faith the source of the warmth in your home. 50 years of research involving thousands of families has shown that the single most important way to increase the likelihood that children will own their faith as adults is to let them experience the practical difference their faith makes in their daily family lives. Kids who grow up in homes where the practice of their faith makes their households more peaceful, more loving, more joyful, are much more likely to practice their faith as adults. Why? Because for kids especially, faith is only real if they can see it being lived out at home and producing good fruit in their relationships at home. To discover more ways your family can celebrate the liturgy of domestic church life, check out the newest editions of Parenting with Grace and visit CatholicCounselors.com. I'm Dr. Greg Popchak, but you can call me Family Man.
To discover more ways faith can enrich your life, Visit CatholicCounselors.com.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to Ave Maria in the afternoon. In this final segment of 2024, we're going to air the last interview we ever did on Kresta in the afternoon. This is when Marcus was hosting before we launched the new program. Al's son, James Kresta, a good friend of the program, joined us and just talked about what was it like to grow up in Al Kresta's house. You know, millions of people heard him on the air every day, but James would get home from school and Al's sitting there at the dinner table ready to talk about life. And so he's going to share those experiences with us. Take it away, Marcus and James.
It's a joy to have you and your son Ian in the studio with us right now.
Marcus, it's a privilege to be here. I mean, for me, it's like I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Kresta in the afternoon. I mean, I'm a fan of yours. So to be here for the final airing of Kresta in the afternoon, the final segment, it's like, what a privilege. I mean, I'm so privileged to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, the privilege is all ours. And James, as I mentioned to your mom Sally in the first hour, first of all, this station, but secondarily and almost primarily, this program is not just the work of Al Kresta. Your whole family, all of you, in one way, shape, or form, helped form this program. In the smallest way, you sacrificed Al so that he could be here to preach and teach to the world. But in a greater way, you all participated in the program. Comments, communication, listening in, and sometimes even showing up for ads and stuff, and all of that. So what was that like for you?
I don't think that my siblings or myself would say we sacrificed him for everybody. I was thinking about, it was such a privilege to share him with the world. I mean, you sit around the dinner table with a man like Al Kresta every night, and you want everyone else to hear this. And so it was such a privilege for us that he got to be on the radio and that the rest of the world got to enjoy him and were able to be edified by him. I really just need to say, I mean, Ave Maria Radio absolutely changed not just my life, but the life of my entire family. I mean, I'm pretty confident I can speak on behalf of my siblings, Alexis, Nick, Evan, David. I mean, we would not be who we are if it wasn't for Ave Maria Radio, obviously because of Dad, but also the people that Dad surrounded him with. We just received the gift that it is. Like I said, I'm a fan.
So you commented during the funeral mass in your eulogy that you not only had Kresta in the afternoon, you had Kresta at 3 a.m.
That's right.
And I think that's something that listeners need to know, that it wasn't like Al switched on a persona when he came on the microphone. Al was, what you saw was what you got. The Al Kresta experience was who he was.
Well, it wasn't what you saw, it was what you heard. What you heard is what you got. What you heard is what I got around the dinner table. And yeah, you all had Kresta in the afternoon. Imagine Al Kresta at 3:30 in the morning when he's texting you or emailing you, which he did frequently. And so for all of us, I mean, he was larger than life, and you would have a conversation with him at home about anything. It could be a piece of music that you recently heard. You know, at 3 in the morning, he's going to be sending you an email saying, James, I listened to the entire collection of that band. Yeah. Here's what and he's going to give you a whole thesis on it. And it was at times exhausting because it's like you can't keep up with this man. But man, am I going to miss it. I'm going to miss it a lot. I think we all are.
You know, James, you made a comment during your eulogy about how Al expressed that one of his greatest regrets was he never got into hip-hop. So I regret, or I am joyful to inform you that I'm the main reason why he said that.
Okay, good.
So just he knew of my background as a gangster rapper before my conversion. And so he and I had frequent conversations about it. And he asked me to build him a playlist, and I never did. We just never got around to it. But that kind of demonstrates the mind and even the heart of Al Kresta. Mm-hmm. He never saw any avenue worth learning for as not worth learning for. Mm-hmm. He saw every bit of truth as crucial because Christ was still present in redeeming culture.
Well, that's absolutely true. And what I said, the hallmark of Al Kresta, the hallmark of Dad, was his relentless pursuit of truth in all its forms and in every corner of his life. I mean, he would pursue the truth of any topic. He was not beholden to any political group. He was not beholden to any special interests or any. All he was beholden to was truth, which is ultimately why he encountered Christ, who is the truth. And so, because of that, he had really authentic and genuine curiosity about everything. And that's when he was such a joy. He could speak intelligently on almost any topic. It was spectacular.
It truly was. And not only an inspiration, but also quite the role model in terms of in my life, the past 5 years, taking me from being just this biblical preacher to basically he challenged me to see that the scriptures that I loved and preached had to be applied to every facet of human existence, because not only is that who Al was, that's how Al lived. And he did that for all of you in your family life.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Absolutely. If you wanted to go, life in the Kresta household, if you want to go see a movie with your friends, okay, he's not likely to say, absolutely not, you can't do that. He's likely to go to the computer and look up the movie and start reading reviews and really dive into it. And then he'll call you in and he'll say, hey, did you look at this? There's this theme in the movie that's problematic, let's say morally problematic. And he would say, do you really think that's what you should go see? And I'd say, well, my friends are going. And he'd go, well, how do you, you're a Christian, right? How do you square going to see this movie if you're a Christian? And here's the thing about it. He wasn't being patronizing or manipulative. He wasn't. He was genuinely interested. How does the human person, how does the Christian react to the world around him? And so now at the end of the day, I'd say, well, I still want to go. And he might say, well, you're not going. So don't get it twisted. But that was how it was. I mean, back when Harry Potter came out, and a lot of Catholics they had heard different things, and it was kind of like, I don't know if we should do this, witchcraft. So people wanted to know, what does Al Kresta think about Harry Potter? Well, Dad, he goes and he gets Harry Potter, and he gives me the first book. I can't remember how old I was, maybe 8th grade or something. And he goes, here, read this, and tell me what you think. So I read it, and we talked about it. And he genuinely wanted to know how things came together, how things worked. Is that relentless pursuit of truth?
Yeah.
That's his legacy.
Amen. Wow. And that's beautiful. That's not only prudent living as a Christian, that's fantastically prudent parenting.
Yeah, I thought so. I mean, he challenged us, just like he challenges all of us, to engage with the matter, the material around us, the music, the literature. He wanted us to get into it, talk about it.
So then going back to this program, he did that every day.
Yeah.
He did that every day on this program. What he challenged you and your siblings to do, your whole family to do, he challenged all of the listeners to do. So in some sense, the listeners became part of your family. They're the extended members of your family.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to articulate how important all of you listeners listening now, how important you are to our family, to the legacy of Dad and this program. There is no Kresta in the Afternoon without you, the listeners. There is no Ave Maria Radio without you, the listeners. And if you spend any amount of time listening to this show, people call in and they say, it was because of Ave Maria Radio that I came back to the Catholic Church, or my husband came to encounter the truth of the Catholic Church. We are co-laborers in the vineyard. Yeah. And that's how Dad viewed all of you. You need to understand, you weren't just listeners to him, you were co-laborers with him. I bore the same responsibility that he bore. Marcus, you bear the same responsibility. Each of you listening right now, whether you're in Omaha, Nebraska, or Gainesville, Florida, you bear the same responsibility that Dad bore, and that is to declare the truth and beauty of Christ and his church in every corner of the world. We don't compartmentalize. He just didn't. Like I said, who you heard is who you got. I mean, he didn't compartmentalize his life. And that's for each of us to do more and more. And I certainly don't do it perfectly, but I certainly want to strive to do it more perfectly.
So today being the final episode of Kresta in the Afternoon, you being Al's son, we need to say goodbye to the program. And we're not putting it to rest because we want to forget it, but because we want to continue the torch. We want to move it forward as Al himself would have wanted.
Oh, absolutely.
So a word of goodbye and exhortation for all of our listeners.
Well, first and foremost, thank you. Thank you for tuning in every day, for calling in during pledge drives, for encouraging Dad and our family with your stories of how this program and this radio station have impacted you. A sincere thank you. My life is so much brighter because of it. And, you know, my childhood was Mom come home from school, Mom's cooking dinner, Dad's on the radio. Always. That was the soundtrack to my entire life. And what a gift. What a gift. You know, it was just part of the fabric. You just didn't even notice it. It was just there. It was like air. So thank you, first and foremost. And second of all, I think there's this tendency. What is the parting message? Well, I can actually tell you because I was there. I was at his bedside for his parting messages to his grandchildren, his children, and I don't think it would be any different for you listeners. Read the Word of God. Study the Scriptures. In it, you will encounter Christ, and He will tell you what to do. He will bring a richness into your life that you cannot even imagine. That was his parting message to his family and his friends, and that includes you, the listener. Study the Word of God.
Marcus talking with Al's son James about growing up in Al Kresta's house. Thanks for listening. Have a happy new year. We'll see you tomorrow.